Welcome to the smallest game in town.
If a club came. So I thought I'd bet it and see what happens.
Okay, welcome to the game. It's been folded round to me in the small blind, and I just decide to call here. I wasn't sure Valerio if he was in an aggressive mood and will start raising me. And as we can see, actually, I have a significant lead here. Will deals the cards out, and I have 4 spades to the flush draw, and decide to bet out 2 into the pot 4. With a pair at bottom pair, Valerio makes a call, fair enough.
It's like a check. Pot small.
And now that makes 2 pair for Valerio. I continue to bet my flush draw. So this is by way of a semi-bluff. It's not going to get through. It's simply called. Valerio could consider raising here, but I'm probably going to stay in unless it's a big raise. I get lucky, and there's my spade flush on the river. And I decide, therefore, to bet, make it 16, and very quickly Valerio decides to call. I show that. So that's just an example of betting a hand which is not made and getting there, in fact, on the river. Valerio had made 2 pair on the turn.
Betting it, I made it on the river, textbook. Oh, you had 2 pair. Wow. Wow. You were winning until the river. You were winning.
Yeah, but it's how much I can bet with it.
Well, I feel your pain, just a bit.
Let's move on to the second hand,
You'd have to put
and
quite a big
this
bet
is a
in.
hand between
It was
Carl
only a
and
jack
Mark.
flush after all, but
And Mark decides just to limp
cook
under
it
the gun
by
with his
2 pair.
10-9. I don't really like that. I think it's a
That's
fold.
raise or
But
something like that.
he's left just with one opponent as the small blind folds. And he flops 3rd pair. And Carl
Two of the people who have
is
the 3
to
people
act,
who
and
have
he
read that
checks
book I bought out the library.
with nothing. And Mark decides to check as well.
You want to read a poker book?
No, I've still read the other one I bought.
Oh, you bought a book? What did you buy?
The next card comes, and it's another club. So now there are 3 clubs out there, and potentially somebody could have a flush. And Carl decides to make a stab at this by betting 3, but with a 4th club and the bottom pair, Mark decides to call. And now Carl makes a determined effort here by betting 15. Although it's hard to see how this is going to get called by a hand that he beats. And Mark thinks about this for a while. He has effectively the 3rd nut.
But it is a forensic analysis of game theory as applied to poker.
It's 15 to call,
It's very good.
and he makes a call
What have you got?
and actually takes down quite a nice pot here. I think that was a bit of a gift for Mark.
Oh, is that? That's fine. You're not playing the board.
Mark actually indicated he was playing the board, but of course he wasn't really.
Certainly you can.
It's folded to Mark, who just limps in as he likes to do, and I'm in the small blind and just decide to call with my Queen 10 of diamonds. Maybe I would sometimes consider raising this, but decide with Valerio in as well, in the big blind, I thought I would just call it. I get very lucky and flop trip queens and bet out 4. Mark really doesn't have anything here. All he has is a backdoor flush draw. So he rather optimistically calls my bet of 4. The turn comes and brings him top pair, but can't be liking it much, particularly as I continue to bet, this time 10. But he very quickly decides to call. Now we see Mark exhibit as I'm thinking about this, he exhibits an interesting tell. Touches his chips like he wants to stop me betting, and that's all I need to know that he really doesn't want me to bet, so I bet out 20. So he's in an awkward situation. He would like to have got a free showdown, but I'm not giving it to him. I bet 20, and he thinks about this. He's got to know that he's probably beaten. There's no straight, there's no flush, but the queens are sitting there. So after some time, he comes to the conclusion that he has got to call this, and he calls 20. And I flip over my trip queens,
You've got a better kicker
and
than that.
he shows his
It's
ace.
all yours.
And I win a nice pot.
Yes, sorry. No, it's yours.
Oh, thank you.
I was looking for the flush actually, but it didn't ever
Well,
materialise.
you needed to hit runner.
No, I'm just saying, when
but
I
you
saw
got
the
an
queen,
ace.
I think I half guessed you had something, but I was still optimistic that well, one came at the end.
Quietly confident.
On to the next hand now.
You had 3 as well.
Hey.
You just right amount.
Yeah, it just drew me in. I probably, if it was even a 25 ray, I might not have called that.
As you probably could see, I didn't have very much. Carl decides to limp. I'm not a big fan of limping, as you know, as you probably guess. And Mark limps with his 2s as well. And the small blind complete, so we are 4 to a flop. And the flop comes down very favourable for Mark. He flops a set of 2s, and Will makes 2 pair. Will decides to bet out, which I don't blame him. It's fair enough. And we don't know what Carl had, but he calls, and Mark just calls as well. I think he should probably just be raising this and trying to build the pot as much as possible. The next card doesn't give any help to Will, and he continues to bet. Given that he's seen no resistance and no raising, I think that's fair enough. And once again, Mark just calls again. And he should once again be building the pot. It's clear that Will has something. I think he's got to be trying to get as many chips in as possible. I would want to be trying to get stacks in. Although there's a flush, possible flush out there, I think it's unlikely. And Will, I think, rightly bets the river, bets 15. And Mark should really be raising here. He's clearly got the best hand here. And he calls and lets him off the hook, really. So although this was a loss for Will, I think he got away very lightly indeed. And lost really the minimum number of chips here.
3 2s. Yeah.
I guess so, right. I knew you had at least top.
So you flopped a set of 2s.
I think between 2 other players, as I said in the, if you listen into the chat, I think another 2 players would have got all their stacks in on that hand like that.
I was never getting him out with 3 2s.
I'm not sure.
Not against you.
It's me. Okay.
Build the pot. You got a customer, Queen 7.
So we move on to the next hand,
There are 3.
and Carl limps under the gun. Once again, I don't know what he's got, but I wouldn't be limping. Mark actually folds, and on the button, Will raises it to 10, quite a big raise. But as you can see, I have pocket aces. So I'm going to re-raise this, 3-bet him to a total of 30. This should be enough to just get it heads up with Will. And Will clearly has something because he calls. And the flop comes down, not completely favourable for me. The queen doesn't rule out the possibilities that he might have a pair of queens and I'm beaten. But I'm going to carry on betting, and I bet 25. And he very quickly calls. I think he's really not sure whether I'm just continuation betting with a bluff here. But I look at his stack and he has a little over 120 or so chips left. And I decide I want to try and play for stacks. If he's got a pair of kings or ace queen, I really want to make him pay to see the last card. So I make it 150. Maybe that's too much. But as he says in the chat, he actually had ace king and therefore had nothing to call me with. So he folds and I take down a nice pot.
If you bluff me out, well done. My problem was...
I think Will was quite pleased that I wasn't actually just bluffing him with rubbish. I think he probably knows by now that I don't do that very often.
You know, stuff's coming out. I know you probably haven't got 8, 9 or something like that, but you could have a pair of queens.
I had you for aces, but what, you know, but you kept going and kept going. I thought, oh, for God's sake, I've lost on these hands because you had a set.
And the next hand comes. And this is a hand involving Will and Mark. I fold, everybody folds round 2, and it's a battle of the blinds really. And Mark just limps with his ace 5, and Will has king 3. He flops third pair. Not much of a hand, but he bets it anyway. And rather speculatively, Mark decides to call. He has a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, or inside straight draw, I should say. So he has a few outs, I guess, any 2 or running clubs, and decides to call. And of course, an ace would be good, as we can see. He doesn't pick that up on the turn, he picks up a 5, so now he is in the lead, and considerably in the lead. It's checked between the 2 of them, but the best card for Will comes, a 3, giving him a pair of 3s, and to his credit, he bets out, and he bets out 13. Which is almost a pot-sized bet, which is good, and puts Mark to the test here. And I think actually betting the river is something we need to try and do a lot more of. And in this case, Mark decides to call, and it is surprising what people call with, I have to say.
You got a
Trip 3's triumph on this
3-3.
occasion.
I think that's the winner.
It's my 2 pairs.
And we'll make some extra chips by betting on the river like that.
2 pair, yeah. We all had at least one.
And in the next hand,
Nothing to get too worked up about. And he
we
got
have
something,
what
so
proved to be the biggest pot of the night. I have ace jack of diamonds against a pair of 6s in Will's hand, and he is under the gun. And he decides to limp. I personally would be raising with the pair of 6s, but he doesn't need to raise because I'm going to be in there raising, and I'll make it 10. And even Valerio comes in with a 10. He later told us he had a pair of 7s. So 3 of us see the flop.
We like to see, mate.
Valerio is the dealer.
yeah.
And the flop gives Will a set of 6s and gives me top pair. So this is a very dangerous flop for me. Will bets out, donks out with 15. Maybe he should be checking here and letting me bet, and then can raise and try. He ought to be now considering trying to play for stacks. It actually got rid of Valerio, who had a pair of 7s. The 4th card is a good card for me. It gives me 3 aces. And Will rather casually throws in the 25. So I've got the alarm bells are going off here. But for 25, I've actually picked up outs here, because any 3 will give me the better full house. The 7 comes, which would have given Valerio a better full house than Will. And he bets 50, and I think, given the way that he bets this with no regard for the possible flush, maybe I have to find a fold.
Well, I'll give you some back.
But it was in the size of the pot. 50 was not a big bet. I think if it had been like 100, I would hope I would find the fold. But I think the way Will played it, he got quite a lot out of it.
I fold 2-7. I fold 2-7. But I couldn't call because the ace just but it's so
nice
important.
on to the next hand, and trying not to be
Nice one.
too upset by that, and having given away most of my profit for the evening on that one hand. We see a hand between Valerio and Carl, who are, it's a battle of the blinds as we all fold. And Valerio makes a raise to 6, and not surprisingly, Carl calls with his King Jack.
2 players, thank you.
Flop comes down, very favourable for Valerio. He's flopped top pair, and he decides to bet out. He bets out a total of 7 into the pot of 12, and very quickly called, just with overcards by Carl. I probably would just be folding here. And then it's checked through. Valerio slows up, gives Carl a free card. He checks, and now, credit to Carl, he bets the river here with 6, and Valerio finds himself drawn out on the river and loses a small pot, but a pot that perhaps if he had carried on betting on the turn, he would have got Carl to fold, and he would have won the pot.
I should have bet.
Because you were in control there, weren't you?
What you're saying, it's absolutely.
This is a hand between me and Will. I have a pair of jacks in the big blind, and this is going to be a battle of the blinds. I think in the small blind here there's a good case for raising, but Will just decides to limp in, and I make the raise to 7. He's very quickly called. And the flop comes down, I think quite favourable for me. I get the open-ended straight draw, and I still have the top pair. So I'm not going to slow down here. I'm going to carry on betting. I bet 5. And I think this is for chance for Will to get away from it. But he has overcards and what he thinks is an inside straight draw. And the straight comes in on the turn, giving me a very strong hand here, and all I need to do now is carry on betting. Gave it some thought and decided to bet 20 into the pot 24. I think now Will has to get away from it, but he decides to just call, not realising that, of course, that 2 of his jacks it would make him a better straight are out of the deck and in my hand. And the dealer puts out the river card, which is a blank, and I decide now to carry on betting. It's a pot of 44, so I decide to make it look like I'm trying to maybe bluff this. But I don't know that he actually has nothing to call me with. So my bet of 64 is never going to be called. And quite rightly, Will throws his hand away. And I reveal my jacks. And credit to Will, he did actually show what he had, which was ace queen.
Yeah, because then I can put it on the video as ace queen. Yeah. Wow.
Nice card, but that flush just, I mean...
I block the straight. If you have, I thought if you've got a queen, I'm blocking the straight. So you, there's only 2 jacks. You didn't know that, did you? But I've got, I had the open-ended straight flop and the top pair on the flop. The other lovely flop.
It was 4 hours.
This is another hand where Carl has just limped in with Jack 8 of diamonds, which I think is either a fold, or if you're going to play it, raise it. I get in cheaply as well, and I found myself doing this quite a lot during the game in the small blind, and I saw a lot of flops, and as you've probably seen, I won a few reasonable sized pots. The big hand here has fallen to Valerio though, who was allowed to play 9-4 suited and flops 3 9s. He bets half pot, and Carl, I think, should just throw this away. I'm not really sure why he's calling here. I don't recall my hand here, but I don't think I had very much. But the Jack comes, which is the worst possible card for Carl, because Valerio carries on betting. He bets 8, and with having hit the jack, Carl plays the hand and calls. Final card is the king, and that slows everybody down. But I think Valerio should carry on betting. He was getting advice from the other players here about continuing the betting with his 9. I think he was, given how tight Carl seemed, he thought Carl was a lot stronger than that. And he takes down a reasonable pot.
Probably good.
He's got 3 9s.
3 9s.
Yeah.
3 of them 9s. I'm surprised you didn't go.
And we come to the last hand. And once again, I'm in the small blind. And with all the limping that's going on, Carl and Mark limp.
I won't have made anything, will I?
And I decide to raise here with my 15. And I was thinking I probably was going to clear everybody out. And I was quite surprised when Mark called, which indicated some strength. But as we can see, I have him completely dominated here.
Hold on.
There's a bit of confusion over how many chips have gone in, but they get it worked out. I hit top pair and even have the backdoor flush draw as a bit of backup. So I'm not going to slow down here. And if Mark has got any of this, I'm expecting him to call me. So I bet 10. Mark thinks about this, moves his chips around a bit. But all he has is an inside straight draw, really, so he decides to call.
Cool.
The jack pairs the board, which really doesn't change very many things. I'm still a big favourite here. And I decide my policy of carrying on betting as much as I can. I
25.
think I'm still ahead, so I bet again. Get the fold and show the ace 9. And Mark is good enough to show his cards so that we can put them on the video. And that completes our game for last Friday. I look forward to seeing you again on the smallest game in town.